topic with the Amazon pips because I think this one actually would fit that perfectly coming off of that Twitter stuff we just talked about.
Definitely. Right in line.
So this person says, I worked in Amazon HR, was so disgusted at what I was seeing in performance improvement plans. Then I got put on the PIP and knew I had to quit. Listen, if you see the PIP, it's time to dip. One more time. If you see the PIP, it's time to dip. Now, I want to see, I'm not going to read everything. So they worked at Amazon HR for 7 years. Dang. And not only did they administer pivots, but it was eventually brought to their attention that they were going to be going through a pivot. They made a mistake of doing that with me. There wasn't a lot of information just to justify poor performance. The pivot goal was a straight across the board 6% number. And as an HR person, that is a hefty figure. And it was driven hard by the HR VPs to show the metrics daily, weekly, to make sure we knew who was on the pipeline, not to improve, but who was in the pipeline to get out. There wasn't a lot of interest in improving people. You might be cutting some prime choice with the fat, and they were okay with that. They wanted that number. The managers who had to implement it and tell their people they were on a pivot, I would say majority of them hated it because one, they didn't have the skills to be able to manage performance that soon out of the gate. A lot of our managers were brand new. The first thing you had to do was work with a pivot consultant. So that was somebody in HR besides the manager's business partner. And you talk about if it was the right time or if it's the wrong time to pivot someone. Let's see. I'm trying to just go through here. I would say 80% of my time ended up being focused one way or another on the pivot. Either the pivot appealed or the pivot work that workers managers had to do. And look, I'm not going to say you're going to ever find somewhere locked down in words, but the idea is if you're putting somebody in a pivot, you make that so damn hard that they don't get out.
Man, that's the part right there.
Yeah. Well, what is this? This is interesting. Later, when the pivot came back, we had to stack rack when we had to stack rank all of our employees. The way we broke it down, we called it top tier, which was, maybe 15 to 20% by the time it worked out. Then you had the middle, and then you had the bottom tier. The bottom tier was about 20 to 25%, maybe even up to 30. The guidelines that they expressed publicly may be different because we also worked to make sure that we had more than that because some went bad or went off the rails and we couldn't exit them for whatever reason. I have PTSD. I was disgusted at what I was seeing from the pivot process. This process alone has given me post-traumatic stress disorder. It impacted me so much as a person that I had to get out of there. When it was justified, it was easy to push someone out. If it's deserved, then there's no problem. But when it wasn't deserved, you had people crying and begging, and they couldn't understand. You have visa-sponsored employees who, once we pivoted them and moved them out, no longer were authorized to work in the United States. So they had to make immediate plans to get out of the country, and it's a long process to get sponsored by another group. In the years I was there, I never, ever, ever had any performance issue given to me, not even anything close to being serious. I had no worries because I asked for feedback all the time. I'm like, what can I do? How can I do better? I didn't ever want to be blindsided by the pivot myself. And what a lot of people did, if they got the indication they were going to draw, if they were going down that track, was what they would transfer jobs right away. Some people were successful, a lot of people weren't. This is a long article.
I feel
uh,
like you touched on the good points. The one that I would really am frustrated by is the fact that you're is the fact that they're receiving criticism about things that they've never been critiqued on before.
mhm.
So it's kind of it's like a slap in the face, especially when you're actively trying to be better and do better. And like this person who wrote this said, like they were constantly asking for feedback. So if you're always asking for feedback and then you're being told that you're performing well, there's nothing more you need to do, and then 2-3 months later you get put on a performance improvement plan, it doesn't the math isn't mathing, and it feels like a slap in the face, especially for someone who is on a visa. Like that's their life.
Yeah,
These people
that's the
have
second part.
families, they have kids, they have a lot of it's not right, man. It's not right.
Yeah,
But
that's
can
why you
you
gotta move how you need to move for yourself and your family always. Always. I think the biggest thing though, I don't know why they were so shocked because they know HR moves like this. HR is there to protect the company. So a lot of times you very well are missing some critical feedback that you need, but HR is not going to tell you until they like give
it's
you a
too
pip.
late.
And you be
Yep.
like, Well, why you ain't tell me ahead of time? That's literally what happened. So you just got to always keep that in mind. Even if you got a quote unquote real manager, sometimes you just got to do your due diligence and make some of your own HR friends, see if they're going to put you on, on game before it's too late.
Can you explain really quickly what stack ranking is for the people who may not know?
I'm as confused as you. I feel like it's an HR term. I will say
It's
they just
I
jumbled
think
everybody together.
yeah, basically where they it's a list and you're either at the top of the list or you're at the bottom of the list. They're comparing all the employees and basically their performance to say this is these people are in the top 10%, these people are in the lower 10%. So like you're literally just like you play a game and you let's say you're playing a racing game and you're stacked in terms of first, second, third, fourth. That's what
Mhm.
stack ranking is.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. They just like I said, they just take numbers and put them down there. I think this is the last part I want to touch on. They said during my performance evaluation, when it was clear I was on a PIP, my manager shared criticisms. Crazy. I didn't even read this yet. I promise I didn't read this yet. Shared criticisms that I never heard before. I said I've never heard any of these comments come to me ever. Essentially, it was a lot of made up stuff. I mean, you could have put some truth to it. I've been late on a few assignments, but everybody's got some elements of things they can improve on in their work. My manager just chose to bring those out. Amazon broke down people into three categories. You were either top tier, middle of the pack, or least effective. Normally, they won't tell you what they rated you. And I'm like, come on. I know this stuff is just as much as you do. I know the wording. You didn't put me in the medium category. We just admit you put me in the least effective category, and I got my manager to admit that. I wasn't put on the pivot. My manager wanted to work with me a little bit to see if I was going to commit to the job. So they sat me down and said I can go on a pivot and leave right away, or they work with me. Well, obviously, not having any job opportunities, I said, look, I'm in it. Let's try to get better and go from there. So my manager took away all my direct reports and shoved me into a small box and said, you could do this and try to work yourself out of it. Right after that, I started putting the full push to get another job. And so I started interviewing. I'm actually, what she said, I actually had a headhunter that reached out to me originally. I told her no, but then some of this stuff happened. I'm like, okay, let's revisit it. I got to the point where they offered me a job and I was going to quit, but I had a huge stock investment coming up. So there was no way I was going to rock the boat in that way, shape, or form, just trying to get to this date. That's an interesting thing. I think a lot of people are worried about that when they have some equity in the company and not want to leave.
That part.
There are ways you can negotiate your package to help out with some of that stuff too. So I'm curious to see what they said they did. If you walked away doing a pivot or any time before you had your investment, before it was there for you. So in this terms, I'm going to infer that her stuff hadn't invested yet.
Yep, pretty much.
And I'm not talking a little bit of money. I'm talking, I had a couple $100,000 coming to me. So I respect it. Listen, sometimes you got to play the long game. I wonder if she would have chose to leave, but they had just like vested it faster for her and just let her get what was hers. So I played along. I'm good at playing along when I have to be. So then the money is in my account. The next day I called my manager and told him I'm resigning. They blew a gasket. I like that. Listen, absolutely blew a gasket because I told them that I was in it for the long run. I said, look, you gave me no choice. You put this threat against me. I'm not just going to sit there and wait for it to be dependent on you. You get to make the call whether I make it or not. My manager was super mad and asked me when was I leaving. I said 2 weeks. They were incredulous that I wasn't giving them more respect. The biggest thing, and I'm going to say this goes for many, many people that were put on the pivot, is there were no warning signs. There was no trail of communication saying you're underperforming. I mean, even if it's something simple as like, hey, can you do better on this next time? I know suddenly I got zero negative feedback. I got the feedback that I was rocking it. And then all of a sudden to be in this place is like, huh? So that's pretty good because you see that happen
I like
all
the
the time.
I like I like the way they wrote that article for sure. It feels very personable.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good article. I just I tried to break it down and I'm glad that you was on here to give me some commentary. Just with the stack ranking thing, I was like, I don't know. Oh guys, I got my techie apparel hat. I gotta get that link so y'all make sure y'all go. Shout out to my people, techie apparel. But yeah, that was me. I thought I was killing it at McAfee. Walked in, seen my coworker walking out with a box of his stuff. You already know that's not a good sign. I could see like if I'm doing hindsight 2020, I could see why he got laid off. Not saying he was a nice guy, but he didn't know anything security wise. Really, a lot of us didn't. He wouldn't speak up in the meetings. He was older than me too. And I was like, yo, do you know what to do outside of looking for WannaCry? He said, no. I said, yeah, that's a problem. And I was only over there with the person who wasn't the manager, and he was just putting me on game, like, hey, do this and this. So at that time, I'm over there pretty much building up a spreadsheet of like, hey, man, we got all these rules finding and sim. They don't need to be here. Let's get rid of them. And nobody cared. I was like, ain't this some? And I should have negotiated my severance and stuff better, but it happens. But once your heart turns cold by a job, nobody's ever the same.